So last week, our buddy Andy Wood from Unity Motorsports Garage gave us the first of 2 installments on setting up multiple carburation for the street. He was talking about intake manifolds and carburetor choices and so on and so forth. Go back and watch that. Uncle Kathy, you put a link. You put a link? Yeah. There. All right. But don't watch it to the end of the video. Wait till the end of the video, then come back to this, and then go click on that. So, this time around, he's talking about the fine-tuning aspects of working with these Holley carburetors. So, now listen to me, right? This is a brilliant video for a couple of reasons. But first, one of Andy's claims is that his low 11-second, 3,600-pound F100 390 Ford powered tunnel ram with a pair of 660 Holleys gets 16 miles to the gallon, which is like ridiculous, right? And a lot of you guys in the comments were like, that's impossible, that can't be done. You know what? Watch this video, okay? Because Andy shows you exactly how he does it. This is, I'm telling you, this is like the most brilliant carburetor video you're going to find in all of YouTube. He gets into the little, like I mean, watch it and you'll see what I'm talking about. And even if you're not running a multiple carburation setup, if you have no intention at all, watch this video anyway, because the things that he gets into and the way he describes the function of each of these systems and how to optimize them is universal to all Holley carburetors. Like this is brilliant stuff, okay? So give it a look and I'll see you on the other side.
So welcome back to our part 2 of tuning carburetors for dual quad tunnel ram setups. While you're looking at a Holley here, the principles that I'm going to show you can be applied to Edelbrock carburetors as well. It's just a different way of going about it. So when it comes to tuning, most people just relate to either jet changes or meter and rod changes in the Edelbrocks. You know, they don't get more in depth into the individual circuits in the carburetor to optimize the tune-up for the dual quad application. And so that's what we're going to do here today on Uncle Tony's Garage. We're going to get inside this thing and figure out how it works. So first things first, you got your dual quad set up, you're ready to crank it up and get everything ironed out. This is a tool that I actually made to balance the carburetors. You see, back in the early 1950s when people were running multiple carburetors on flatheads, they always made sure that the carburetors were in sync with each other. And the same principle applies to dual quads. Why is that important? Well, you adjust the idle screw to the exact same spot on both carburetors, and believe it or not, due to the manufacturing tolerances of the carburetors themselves, the throttle blades might not be positioned exactly the same on the shafts, so on and so forth. What this tool does is allows you to adjust the carburetor so that they're actually working in unison with each other. So something to think about. I've actually got a video on my channel, Unity Motorsports Garage, talking about how I made this tool and the operation of it. Basically, once you crank your engine for the first time, you leave the throttle linkage off of it and you set this over top of each carburetor going back and forth, and the ball will go up about midways here in this cylinder, and you keep adjusting the screws until both of the ball goes up to the same spot on both carburetors. Once you know that each carburetor is using the same amount of air, then you can start further in the tuning process. Okay, so now that you've got the car idling, you're probably going to notice that it's going to be running really rich at idle. If it's not, that's great. But most times, because what happens is when you add another carburetor to the mix, you're pulling fuel from more orifices in the carburetor because you're still in a high vacuum situation underneath the throttle blade. So it's going to pull a lot of fuel. So when you start adjusting your idle mixture screws, you'll probably keep trying to turn them in, and if you find out that even at a half a turn or almost bottomed out that it's still running really rich or whatever the case is, then it's going to require some further detail. So what you're looking at here are 2 metering blocks. They are both for 600 vacuum secondary carbs, but this one is the one that I use on my 660 center squirters. While they're very similar, they're different. From the factory, Holley presses in a little brass orifice into the idle feed restriction. Sometimes it's down here, other times it's up here. And if it's up here, I suggest pulling it out and putting it down below the fuel level in the bowl to have it covered up with fuel at all time. But anyway, that is the orifice right there. Okay, so if you're running really rich and you can't do anything with it with your mixture screws, the only other option is going to be to reduce the size of this orifice. It can be done 2 ways. The racer trick of years ago was to take some hobby wire, cut a small piece, insert into the hole itself, bend it, and let the gasket keep it there. While it works really good, it's quick, easy, and it's fast. I've done it many times as a trial and error thing to figure out where I'm going with the tune-up. If this gets you in the right direction, then you can make the choice of going to a more permanent deal like I did on mine. And I actually drilled out the factory idle feed restriction, tapped it to accept a 6/32 Allen screw. Let's see here. Let's take it out so you can see it. Pretty much making my own jet for the idle circuit. Then I had a pin vise and a drill, and I could get the exact size right for the combination to get the air fuel ratio that I was looking for at idle. Typically on an engine, you're going to be trying to get the engine to run as lean as possible at idle, but there's variables in that depending on your camshaft, compression ratio, so on and so forth. Some engines just have to run inherently richer than others. It'll be up to you to figure out what's best for your combination. So moving on from the idle circuit, we're going to go to the transfer slot, and this is where some real economy gains can be had. Okay, what I have in front of me is a stock base plate off of an old 660 center squirter. You can see how the throttle blades open in a 1-to-1 fashion due to the unique linkage here. But let's talk about the idle and transfer slot. First thing you'll notice about this base plate is there's 4 holes drilled, 1 in each throttle blade. When you put your carburetors on your engine, and if some chance you have to open the throttle blades a good bit to get it just to idle, that means that you're going to have to put a controlled leak into the throttle blade to allow the engine to get more air. This only applies mostly with engines that have pretty big camshafts. You want to start out small because once you drill the hole, you can't go back. I suggest starting out with about a 60 thousandths hole on the primary side only, and then if for some reason that's not enough, you can add holes back here and increase both of them progressively until you get it where you need it. But moving on to the transfer slot, let's see if you can see, you want to barely have the transfer slot exposed when the carburetor is actually idling. If it's up like this right here, it's going to dump an additional amount of fuel in there, and it's not going to be good. But one of the things that's most misunderstood, I guess, is the amount of time that you spend in driving and you're actually pulling fuel from the transfer slot instead of the main circuit. You have to remember, on a tunnel ram setup or dual quad, mostly tunnel rams with a 1-to-1 linkage, you're getting a lot of throttle opening by having 2 carburetors there versus only 1, and so you're going to get more throttle response without having to have as much throttle input. So the majority of the time of you driving around on the street, you're going to be in the transfer slot. You're not even going to be pulling fuel from the main jets. Important thing to note is the size of the transfer slot, the width, and the depth. because that will play a part into the air-fuel mixture itself. Most aftermarket billet throttle blade or throttle plates that I have seen, the transfer slot is actually cut wider and deeper, and what that means is the mixture will be extremely richer, of course, because it's getting more of a passageway for the fuel and air to go through. If you find yourself in that situation, there's things that you can do to the carburetor main body to alleviate that problem. If you notice right here, these two holes in the main body is where the carburetor supplies the base plate for the fuel for the transfer slot. You can drill and tap that for an 8/32 size screw in order to create have a jet for the transfer slot. Getting this right here on a tunnel ram setup that you're trying to drive on the street can make huge differences in economy, but the motor is going to be a lot happier as well. Okay, so now that we've talked about the idle and transition slot, now we're going to move on to the main circuit, and this is where everybody knows something about carburetors, changing the jets. What you will find in dual quad setups and tunnel ram setups is that you're going to have to run a lot smaller jet size than you normally would in a single 4-barrel application. The reason for that is, in the first video I mentioned about the airflow capacity of the carburetors. You know, just because you have a 600 CFM carburetor and you put another one on there, that doesn't give you 1200 CFM because the rate in which the air is moving through the carburetor, it slows down considerably. Well, guess what happens if you're using less air through each venturi of the carburetor? You're going to need less fuel, and so that's why you run leaner jets, because of the pressure differential. It's not uncommon to see like a 4 or 6 jet spread of what you would normally see in a single 4-barrel application, and once again, this is going to go back to your engine and doing trial and error tuning until you figure out what your engine actually likes. Talking about jetting, there's some different things, because in the last video I talked a lot about boosters. Normally, the less active booster, you're going to have a bigger jet in the carburetor. Your straight leg boosters and a regular down leg. But once you start getting step down legs and annulars, you will find that you will have to reduce that jet size even further because of the amount that pull the engine has on the booster and the ability to draw the fuel out of the bowl. So especially with annular boosters, where you have a booster that has 6 or 8 or 12 orifices for the fuel to come out of, it's going to require a lot smaller jet. Just keep that in mind. Another thing that affects the jetting is plenum size. Normally a smaller plenum, say on a tunnel ram, will require less jet, and the reason why that is because the less plenum volume you have, the stronger the pulse is in the manifold pulling the fuel from the carburetor and from the bowl. You put a larger plenum on it and it weakens that signal, thus making you have to run a little bit bigger jet size. Now this is where everyone goes wrong with carburetor jetting. This is for your high-speed cruise. That's it. When you use this as a wide open throttle tuning aid, that's where things get kind of hairy, because if you tune your wide open throttle based off of these jets right here, you're going to throw away all of your fuel economy, and I'm going to show you why. The power valve. What happens is, in the engine or the carburetor, when the engine vacuum drops to a specified level that's normally on the back of the power valve itself, this little valve will open and it will allow more fuel to go into the chamber right here behind the power valve, into those 2 orifices that you see, giving the engine more fuel. So really when you're tuning for high speed, you know, like your drag strip, you want to do that with these two orifices right here versus this. Now what you can do is, if you've got your cruise high speed air fuel ratio sorted out, when you go to the track you can put larger jets into it, into the metering block, to figure out what it likes at wide open throttle, and then correlate the difference in the size of the jet in relation to these orifices right here. If you notice, once again, I modified these metering blocks to accept, once again, my favorite little made jet. And pretty much what you do is you can have it set at different orifices so that you can combine the area of this jet and this orifice to give you the fuel volume of a larger jet. And that's how you want to tune for the track and a wide open throttle, because if you use this, you're going to throw away a ton of fuel economy. So I know we covered a lot of ground today on the basic tunability of each circuit, and it plays an important part because they all work in relation to each other as you go through the RPM range. And since we're doing this video for YouTube, you know, if we were to really get in detail about this, it could go on for hours. But you get the idea. And all it takes is a little bit of experimenting, and you can have a dual quad setup running extremely well on the street. Because think about this, if it couldn't be done, the OE manufacturers back in the 60s would have never offered it as an option. So it can be done. You can get great power, great drivability, and have your cake and eat it too. Once the engine becomes happy when you're giving it the right amount of air fuel mixture, guess what the byproduct of that is? You're going to get better fuel economy. And just like Uncle Tony said, it makes sense. 8 barrels, 8 cylinders equals all the fun. And thanks for letting me come on your channel, Uncle Tony. And once again, this is Andy from Unity Motorsports Garage.
Great stuff, right? Go back and watch it again, and then go back and watch it again, right? And most of all, make sure you subscribe to his channel, because this guy he just has, like, this stuff just falls out of his head. It's crazy. So I know he focused only on the Holley carburetors. We're probably going to end up doing a part 3 covering the Edelbrock AFB style carburetor. But for right now, I mean, that's a head full right there. And like I said, go subscribe to his channel, ring the bell, like everything the guy does, and we're definitely going to be doing more with him, you know, in the very near future. So that's it. I'll see you tomorrow.